Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world. And so much love to each and every one of you. I do hope you're doing remarkably well. And what a fantastic story we have been listening to. And we're on the final part of the story, and it's a fascinating story about a woman who really didn't want to jeopardize the success of her business by letting it get out to the media that a body had died on her property in her living room. And so she moved the body to the woodgrove, and regretfully, a couple of Bigfoots took that body away and put it in a farmer's field. So someone has come to stay at the inn who's going to be taking photography, and he's been able to see exactly what happened because he has some kind of ability to see things that most of us wouldn't be able to see. Psychic ability, I think you call it. So let's continue with part 4 of our story. "People can be very funny, Kim," I said. "We're all different, are we not? But someone dying in your living room when you've just opened the White Owl Inn couldn't be a very auspicious start for anyone. People by nature can be exceedingly superstitious, so I guess moving the body of Mr. Reynolds makes perfect sense. Maybe in your circumstances I might have done the very same thing. You never know how you're going to react in a situation until you become embroiled in it yourself. Sometimes we can surprise ourselves by the way we react." "Of course what the Viceroys did makes perfect sense. I completely understand it," said my wife Peggy. "You don't want your guests to know about things like this because it could be quite distressing for them if they were to know about it. It could certainly put them off staying in such an idyllic inn like this. Rub the shine off it a little, if you know what I mean. I tell you what, why don't we stop talking about such a morbid subject and get on with the job at hand? We want to focus on this photographic project we have ahead of us. The trees look spectacular out of doors, also golden in fall. We need to get some shots of them in our photographs for that glossy spread we're going to do." My wife cheerfully changed the subject. Nothing further was discussed about Mr. Ian Reynolds and his unfortunate passing. It was almost as if the subject had never been discussed at all, rather like a hole in the road that gets repaired, and you no longer remember even existed. Later that evening, after a delicious home-cooked meal with the Viceroys, when we returned to our stunning bedroom suite, my wife Peggy laid into me hard. If she could have hung, drawn and quartered me on the spot, she probably would have done so, without even batting an eyelash. I guess I deserved what was coming to me. "I'm very disappointed in you, Laurie. Really I am. Why do you always put me in this awkward position, where instead of feeling like your wife, I feel like a formidable headmistress correcting bad behaviour from a kid playing truant? You make me feel as if I'm a dragon at times. But can I help it when you put me through the loop yet again? Well done. You succeeded in really upsetting Kim Viceroy today. I don't think her husband was remotely impressed with you. And can you blame him for that? He seriously looked like he wanted to clobber you. But unlike you, he was able to compose himself, keep his emotions in check, and guard his tongue." "He wasn't impressed," I agreed. "Of course he wasn't impressed. The Viceroys, I will remind you, Laurie, have hired us to do a job for them. This is our business, and if they didn't happen to be such amenable people, they could have easily kicked us to the curb, told us we were no longer welcome at their inn, that we were as nutty as fruitcakes and they didn't know what we were talking about, and they would have been in their rights to do so. Kim didn't have to admit to anything to us about the death of Mr. Reynolds. But bless her cotton sock, she broke down and told us everything. But I was right, wasn't I, Peggy? Everything I saw in my visions was correct." "Look at you! You're so pleased you're right, aren't you? You are embarrassing. Do you know that, Laurie? Completely embarrassing. I don't care what visions you were having or how accurate they actually were. I don't give a damn about any of that. The long shot of it all, Laurie, is you shouldn't have said a single word about anything. But when push comes to shove, as usual, you can't keep that trap of yours shut. What are you trying to prove, Laurie? It's like you want to say, I know what you did. It's pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. I just wanted an explanation for the visions I was seeing in my head. They seemed like nice, agreeable people, the Viceroys, and I wanted to make sense of these images I was seeing. Don't you get it, Laurie? It's absolutely none of your business. Put that in your pipe and smoke it, will you? It's none of your business. Read my lips. None of your business. Don't be like that, love. Don't be like what, Laurie? I'm entitled to be angry with you. I felt so dreadfully sorry for poor Kim Viceroy. She's such a delightful lady, is she not? She's really broken up about what happened to Mr. Reynolds. She feels terrible about moving the deceased corpse to the grove. But I can perfectly understand why she and her husband did it in the circumstances. In her shoes, I might have been tempted to do the very same thing, for the sake of the business, if I happened to own the inn. So we're not in a position to judge what they did. It's hard enough making a living out there these days, with so much competition out there, everywhere you look. Let's not kid. Something like that, getting out into the public domain, can be like an aggressive, fast-growing cancer, to eat your business alive. I didn't think of it like that, I will admit, I said, with my tail sitting very sternly between my legs. I did feel like a prize cad when I looked back at how I'd practically accused the lovely couple of insidiously harming one of their guests. That's your problem, Laurie. Sometimes you don't think, and it makes me hopping mad. It really, really does. You promised me you weren't going to upset anyone today. You gave me your solemn word. But no, you reduced Kim to tears. Well done on that one. What is wrong with you, Laurie? Why do you have to keep upsetting people like this all the time by saying things that are just not appropriate? People don't want you going spilling their secrets to all and sundry, do they? It's not a kind thing to do. What you did was downright unkind, Laurie. Get it? Unkind. I hope you're proud of yourself, because right now you make me so sick that I can't bear to look at you. I feel so ashamed. You've got the tact of a rhinoceros. And believe me, those things are thick-skinned. Well, I didn't mean to upset Kim. I'm just really sorry about that. I was just seeing everything so clearly in my visions. I couldn't help myself from blurting out what I was seeing, could I? Really? Said my wife, raising a cynical brow. You could have fooled me, Laurie. I'm sorry, but I don't buy that for a single second. I've known you all my life, well, virtually all my life, since I was 18 years old. You used to be one of the most tactful, diplomatic people I've ever met, and it was a noble quality I really admired about you. I'm sorry, but everyone has the ability to guard their tongue, and you would do well to do the same. If you go on spilling everybody's secrets, you'll end up acquiring an ocean of enemies. And let's not kid. Some people have been killed over revealing secrets. Even the Bible tells us we should guard our tongues. If you must know, I think Kim Viceroy was relieved that I was talking about Mr. Reynolds' death. I think she was very glad to get the subject off her chest. Oh, goodness gracious, listen to yourself. You are so delusional, Laurie, so delusional. You really believe that? Well, then you're a bigger fool than I thought you were. I'm quite sure Kim Viceroy didn't want to be reminded of any of that. Kim is not telling us everything she knows, I said. She knows what happened to Mr. Reynolds' deceased body when it was moved away from the woodgrove. My wife's face reddened. She pointed an accusing finger at me, and her dagger-like looks would have made any self-respecting man shut up almost at once. Don't you dare! Don't you dare, Laurie, go uttering a single word about your preposterous theories to Kim. Do you understand, Laurie? That woman is struggling to get over her grief for what happened to Mr. Reynolds' body. You saw how remorseful she was. She broke down into tears thanks to you and your candid remarks. The last thing she needs is you ruffling her feathers up again and asking her any more awkward questions. As I was telling you, Pegs, she knows more than she's saying, Kim Viceroy. She's keeping a secret. Mind your own bloody business, Laurie. For once in your life, keep your zip shut, will you? Mr. Reynolds' death was due to natural causes. You and I both know that. The coroner confirmed as much. How the body got transferred from the woods to a farmer's field 2 hours away is absolutely none of our business. Either way, I don't care a hoot about it. For God's sake, let sleeping dogs lie, will you? I really like the Viceroys. And who knows what other job opportunities they might give us in the future, if we're so lucky. Do you want to ruin it for us? No, of course I don't, I said solemnly, deciding that closing this conversation with my wife might be a good idea before she ate me alive. But I knew deep down in my heart that I wanted answers to the enigmatic questions that kept stampeding into my head like a herd of rampaging bull elephants. Even though I tried my best to push the questions aside, I could not help but feel that Kim was definitely keeping a secret. And she was also keeping the secret from her husband. The woman knew exactly what had happened to Mr. Reynolds' body. And one way or another, I would get the truth out of her. But I'd have to be clandestine in my approach, and very tactful, as my wife Peggy would be on to me like a vulture devouring a dead man's carcass, and ripping his flesh apart until nothing is left. Ostensibly, she was not best pleased with me that night, when I tried my utmost to snuggle up to her in bed. She pushed me away brusquely and told me not to touch her. I need my space, Laurie. Please don't crowd me, will you? You've caused me enough distress already, and now you want to touch me. Are you kidding me? I'm so angry with you at the moment that I just need to let off some steam. So leave me in peace, will you? It was the following morning over the breakfast table, when a delicious spread was laid out before me and my wife, from Danish pastries to croissants, cold meats, breads and fruit. A continental breakfast, I believe they call it. That I saw my perfect opportunity to get some private time with Kim Viceroy. She told us, very matter-of-factly, that she was going to take a walk in the woods after breakfast. This greatly surprised me. I love this time of the year. The weather's absolutely perfect, the temperatures are idyllic, and the golden showers on the trees are spectacular. She paused for a brief moment and said, In case you're wondering, I'm not concerned about going into the woods. Despite everything that happened with Mr. Reynolds' body, I still feel safe in those woods, believe it or not. But are you sure that's a very good idea? Said Peggy. I don't mean to interfere, but I mean somebody stole Mr. Reynolds' body from those woods. Isn't the place a bit creepy, perhaps? That's a funny thing, it's absolutely not creepy. The woods are alive with pretty birdsong, and the trails are beautiful. It's anything but creepy. I'm quite sure, Peggy, that Kim wouldn't be going into the woods if she didn't feel safe in there. What happened to the late Mr. Reynolds is an isolated incident, I'm most sure. So you're going to the woods, are you, Kim? I said very eagerly, turning to look directly at her, unable to disguise the enthusiasm that rippled across my face in a wild, ebullient, childlike grin. What a very good idea. It's a very beautiful day today. Would you mind most awfully if I joined you? I could do with getting some exercise, and while I'm at it, I might as well take some photographs for the glossy cover spread. People always appreciate woodland scenery, do they not? My wife shot me a warning look, but I willfully ignored her and said, As I was saying, exercise will do me good. Would you like to come along, sweetheart? I said, turning to my wife, and giving her a nauseating saccharine sweet smile that I knew was making her recoil in disgust. Sometimes I got an odd sense of satisfaction in winding up my wife, because she always looked so very cute when she got cross. You know, I can't possibly come for a walk in the woods with you, Laurie, my wife said, looking annoyed. Can't you see I'm still wearing this wretched brace on my foot? The doctor said it won't be fixed for another 6 weeks or so. But you knew that already, didn't you, Laurie? I inwardly smiled, for I knew my wife had been instructed not to exercise her ankle for a few weeks, as it had been badly broken when she slipped at the gym on a rebounder of all things. Oh, I forgot about your ankle. Oh, what a pity, my cherub. It would have been great if you could have come and joined us. I lied. My wife glared at me. You're welcome to join me on my walk, Laurie, said Kim. Actually, I'd appreciate the company. And I do think if you bring your camera along, you could get some great shots of the scenery. She turned around to look at my wife sympathetically. I'm so sorry about your ankle, Peggy. It's a bummer you can't join us on the walk. My husband can't come with us because he's already gone to town, but he'll be back shortly. But while we're away, just make yourself comfortable. Help yourself to coffee, anything you fancy. How thoughtful of you, Kim. That's so kind of you. But don't you worry about me. Go off and enjoy yourself in the woodgrove. I've got lots to do to prepare for the photographs. I've got plenty to keep me occupied. And I'm sure your husband will be back any time soon. As I was leaving for the walk, my wife leaned over to whisper in my ear, I hope you're not up to any mischief, Laurie. If I've found you've upset Kim in any way, there will be hell to pay. Do you understand? I don't know what games you're playing, but I'm on to you, Laurie. I'm watching you like a hawk. I'm sure you are, sweetheart, and don't I know it? I said very innocently, blowing her an exaggerated but very sweet kiss. My wife frowned at me, giving me a formidable glare. I knew that wife of mine could read me like a book. She could smell mischief on me, clearer than the brute aftershave that I was wearing. She was not remotely impressed with me of late. I felt somewhat sheepish and rather guilty as I sashayed through the grove with Kim Vickeroy at my side, wondering how I would be able to tell Kim that I knew she knew more about what had happened to the late Mr. Reynolds' body. There would be hell to pay with my wife if I upset this woman any more than I had already done so. Kim seemed reasonably happy that morning. She was in a contented, docile, relaxed state. I was rather relieved to see she was carrying no resentment or bitterness towards me, after what had transpired the previous day, when my rude outbursts about my visions had taken central stage and rather ruffled up the Vickeroy's feathers. I really think my Peggy could take some tips from Kim Vickeroy, because my wife was like a bear with a sore head. If I ever did anything to aggrieve her, she'd never let me forget it in a hurry, and had been known to pout for days on end when she wasn't pleased with me. Kim was extremely different in that regard. She didn't take herself too seriously, and seemed to go with the flow of life, rather like a paper boat on a stream. I wish Peggy could be more easygoing like that. I wouldn't blame her for despising me, Kim I mean, after the things I'd said that had made her face an inauspicious event that she would really rather forget. I had pretty much dragged her to an old memory, like pushing a dog's nose back into its vomit. Kim was the kind of person I could see who was quick to forgive. But she surprised me when she pointed to the spot where she and her husband had left the body of the late Mr. Reynolds. We left him over there, under that tree, she told me. But then I expect you know that already, don't you, Laurie? She said, looking at me pointedly. I mean, you probably saw this place in your vision, did you not? No, I didn't, if you must know. In my vision, I saw the deceased corpse of Mr. Reynolds being dragged on a blue tarpaulin by the two of you, and being laid out on some leaves in a wooded area. As far as I was concerned, it could have been anywhere. I could see you and your husband doing it, and how distressed you invariably were. But to tell you the truth, it was like looking at a scene at the theatre, and the curtain closes and the scene is over, so I don't get to see anything else. So no, I don't know everything, I explained. Sometimes I get insights, flashbacks, pictures in my head. There are times I can even read people's thoughts. But other times I might as well be looking at a blank piece of paper, because I can't see anything. "Do you like this gift you acquired after that skiing accident?" Kim asked me curiously. "I mean, you gave me quite the shock when you told me about what me and my husband had done to Mr. Reynolds' body. My husband was upset that I confessed everything to you. But I suppose it was kind of good to tell someone what had happened. You don't think I'm a monster, do you, Laurie? I mean, this was my idea, you know."
"Monster? Goodness gracious me, no. You're not a monster, Kim. You did what you felt was right at the time. But it wasn't like you were harming Mr. Reynolds, was it? He was already deceased. If you must know, it's a bit of a curse being able to see things like I do." This was probably my quintessential perfect moment to say, "But I do know that you're hiding something, because you know what happened to Mr. Reynolds, don't you?" But I just couldn't bring myself to say it to her. I kept getting visions of Peggy telling me that she knew I couldn't be trusted to keep my zip shut.
"I was right, wasn't I, Laurie?"
she would lightly say.
"You thought you would go into the wood grove on the pretence you wanted a leisurely walk, when all the time you wanted to get Kim Vickeroy to talk about what she believed had happened to Mr. Reynolds when his body was teleported from one place to another. I knew it all along. I knew you couldn't be trusted."
We continued to sashay down the earthen paths, and I was enjoying the walk, I have to say. Kim had lived in Buffalo for many, many years, so she talked to me at length about the place, and I was pleasantly surprised to find we had friends in common. On our walk, I realized my wife was right. Much as I wanted to extract more information out of Kim about how the late Mr. Reynolds' body had disappeared from the woodgrove, I just couldn't ask her about the matter, almost as if my wife's scolding had finally made my tongue tie itself into a great big knot, so speaking about anything that might make my wife blow up like a berry in indignation had somehow made me become a much more tactful person. Of course, it was none of my business what had happened to the body of Mr. Reynolds, how it had been transported from this woodgrove to a farmer's field 2 hours away from Stowe. My problem was I was an interfering busybody, wasn't I? I just liked to know things. I had an unquenchable curiosity. In a trice, Kim suddenly stopped short in her tracks.
"Did you hear that?" she asked me. "You must have heard that. Surely you heard that."
I looked at her blankly. "I didn't hear anything," I said. "What was I supposed to hear?" I asked her.
"But haven't you noticed? That's the whole point. There's nothing. There's no sound. The woods have become so quiet," said Kim. "I have a sense we're not alone."
I was surprised that Kim didn't look panicked, but more intrigued, almost as if she knew not only that someone was there watching us, but exactly who that someone was.
"Oh my God! They're back again! Can you hear them?"
she asked me. That was when I heard heavy feet thumping across the forest floor, twigs being snapped, branches being broken, leaves being crunched. And then amongst those noises I heard 2 very discernible voices, speaking in a strange, very unusual language. And that was when I saw them. Kim did not react with any fear, but stoically appeared to stand her ground, which I couldn't easily comprehend, given how easily she had burst into tears the previous day. I had automatically assumed that the easy-going Kim had another side to her character that was over-emotional, very sensitive, taking everything to heart. But out here in the grove, she was showing me up by being more level-headed and composed than I was being. I was the one that looked like I'd put my hand through an electric socket, so that every hair on my body was standing up on end, so much so that I lightly resembled Sonic the Hedgehog. I've never known my whole body to become as rickety as an old rocking chair, but I began to quiver and shake, as such was my earnest trepidation. Kim, who was standing next to me, had put an arm around me and was holding me up so I didn't fall over and faint. I always believed that the natural instinct to run away when you're facing your biggest fear will oblige you graciously with a much-needed adrenal response. So much like a bullet being fired, you can take off like a rocket. The mortifying reality was I was frozen to the spot, incapable of even moving a muscle. I stared incredulously, feeling rather bemused at the two humanoid creatures. They were titanic in size. I became mindfully aware of how pathetically small, vulnerable, and weak I was by contrast. What happened next was absolutely confounding. The Bigfoots were staring at both of us, but they didn't appear to look as if they'd been caught off guard in any way, nor did they seem remotely surprised to see us. On the contrary, it felt like this unlikely rendezvous had been preordained, almost as if God himself had orchestrated this unlikely union or meeting between souls. When the male Bigfoot spoke to us, his voice boomed through the grove. His words were powerful and eloquent, and although he was speaking in his own native tongue, this time he turned around to look directly at Kim, and I heard his words translated into English in my own mind, as clear as day. I honestly do not know how this happened. Kilani kwasina hom patilato hasikatali loko hoshani kilisana poloti. I'm glad to see you're not hiding from us this time. We knew exactly where you were when you were hiding last time. We feel energy. We see it too. We moved the deceased body for you far away from here. We didn't need it drawing attention to us. I just hope that wasn't an inconvenience for you in any way. The Bigfoot turned around, and this time he looked directly at me. He was pointing to the female Bigfoot and said something to which the female Bigfoot nodded. It was something about me. I could feel it in every bone in my body. It was almost like they had spotted that I had spinach on my teeth and were trying to point it out to me. Finally, the male Bigfoot spoke again. Ha kina nilonobo. Ha tila tila kwa, hom san silana, kolo tila tanaso, ha kila sana kwa. Why is your spirit window open? He shook his head. That's not good news. You don't want your spirit window open, for it can invite in unclean spirits to enter your body, and walk-ins into your very soul. You don't want that, do you? There is evil in this world, and it's always looking for a doorway in which it can enter. I knew I could feel a spirit window open somewhere. I could feel the draft from miles away, but I didn't expect it to be on you. I make it my business to keep portals closed at all times, because some of the things that come through those open doors are dangerous. They could potentially eat you alive, if given the chance. Some of your kind have been taken through open portals, never ever to be seen again. The male Bigfoot seemed to be thinking for a moment. He scratched his head thoughtfully, and then he said, Kati kwasana, akinato, ma tilani kwasana, janikali sokolo, paki sakalana. That's it. I think you must have crossed over to the other side prematurely, when it was not your time to die. You were flung out of your body, were you not? It can cause much upset and confusion. Your spirit still hasn't settled down from the impact of that experience, which is why the window was flung wide open. It's hardly a surprise, I suppose. Sometimes when you're flung out of your body unexpectedly, the spirit window opens, and it can cause great issues in your life. Don't you worry, I will correct it for you, because something untoward might enter the window and cause chaos in your life, and we can't have that, can we? It was the female Bigfoot that spoke next. It was almost like she was asking me permission to let my spirit window be closed. I realized later that what the Bigfoots were referring to was my psychic abilities, the way I could see things that I shouldn't see, and know things I shouldn't know, that had happened after that skiing accident in Switzerland. I can only assume that that was the spirit window to which she was referring to.
Kila tinaqua, baka sinatala, kolopono tila sikati. Let him do it for you. He knows what he's doing. He likes to help where he can. You'll feel so much better for it, I promise you that.
Before I knew it, I found myself staring into the male Bigfoot's eyes. He had drawn my attention to him by waving his hands, and it was almost like I was diving into a warm ocean of turquoise water, even though the Bigfoot's eyes were brown. When I did this, I felt swaddled in a warm, loving energy, and it was like a light inside of me that was not supposed to be on was switched off, and almost immediately I felt so much better, as finally I felt more grounded. "It is done," said the male Bigfoot. "Ka ki konopotana ha silasanatwa kon toloni pata salikani kolokoshani sawa." I knew we were supposed to have a mission today of some sort. You were obviously called in the grove for us to help you. I'm glad we have been of service to you. May God be with you. The Bigfoots then turned around and were gone, leaving me and Kim Vickeroy staring at each other in absolute bewilderment.
"What did he do to you?"
Kim asked me.
"I saw a flash of light go off in your eyes. What was that about?"
"I think the electric mains to my psychic ability has been cut off, if you like. That's what I believe has happened. And if the truth be told, I feel so much better for it. Much more like my old self before the accident in Switzerland. Ever since then, I've always felt a bit unhinged, as if a part of me was loosely fitting and needed to be tightened, if you know what I mean."
"I suppose I do. Well, that's going to be a huge relief for you, isn't it? Not having all that psychic stuff bothering you the whole time."
She looked at me and said,
"Now you know exactly what happened to Mr. Reynolds' body. But please don't tell anybody about that. Pinky promise?"
We both linked our pinky fingers together, making an agreement. I would never tell her secret to anyone. We walked back to the inn, both of us deeply impacted by our strange encounter with two remarkable Bigfoot, and not wishing in the slightest to share our experience with anyone, even with our most nearest and dearest, and especially not my wife Peggy. These days, when I think about that very unlikely event, I ask myself, did that really happen? But I know that it did. I'm very glad that my spirit window has been permanently closed. I did not enjoy having psychic ability. It was so frustrating. Peggy is delighted about this, of course, because I don't go around causing her dreadful embarrassment. These days we have 2 children and 2 dogs running around the place. Peggy stays at home as a stay-at-home mum, while I go off on trips taking photographs for people. But let's just say, none of those trips are more memorable to me than my idiosyncratic visit to the White Owl Inn, where I still remain in touch with Kim and her husband. But she claims she hasn't seen the Bigfoots again. So there you are. That is my story. Wow, what an incredible story. So much fun it was. Delightful in every way. Until next time, goodbye and good night.